Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. This is my second ever live, and I am so excited today to share with you a topic that I am calling all the feels. We'll get into feelings, we'll get into emotions, we'll talk about how they work. And as everyone is joining, settling in, if you're watching this on repeat, I have a question for you to get us started. How are you today? And I'll just give you a minute to think about it. Now, your answer might be something like, "You're fine," or "You're good. You're doing all right." Those are kind of our general cultural answers to this question of how are you feeling today? Um, what's kind of funny, I think, is one of my colleagues and I used to always ask each other this question at the beginning. We realized we were just saying fine. It was almost like our quick version of hello. And so we just started saying standard greeting instead, because how are you has become such a normal cultural part of us interacting. So, as we go through our material today, I would like you to just think about how you're doing and how your view of that may shift and change a little bit as we go on. So, by way of introduction, my name is Annie Archer-Byerley, and I am an anti-corporate career and leadership coach and trainer. And I am dedicated to bringing you all of the career, leadership, and professional development opportunities that you would find in a big corporation without the corporate BS. And I'm thinking of calling this series of Lunch and Learns Happy Desk Lunch, because the idea is to bring you a 30-minute lunch and learn that's not dry, that'll help make your sad desk salad a little bit less sad. And I do this every Thursday at 1 p.m. Central. So today I have a few things to teach, a few pieces of information. I'll stop and pause and give you time to reflect as we go along as well, so you can absorb the information and think about how you're using it in your day-to-day life. If you're live, if you're joining us live, you're welcome to drop any questions you have in the comments. You're also welcome to answer the questions that I pose to you in the comments, and I will try to monitor our chat. Please just note that this is on LinkedIn. You are commenting on LinkedIn, so don't put anything in there that you wouldn't want your grandmother to read, or like the rest of everybody on LinkedIn. So let's get into it. What we'll be talking about today is feelings and emotions. This is a topic that I get maybe a little bit too excited and nerdy about. So get ready for some fast talking and excitement about scientific information that may just kind of change the way you think about this topic. We'll go through some research about emotions, talk about some myths that you may kind of have in the back of your head about them and what the reality based on kind of more current neuroscience actually is. And then, because it's always nice to walk away knowing that you can use these things, I have a tool to introduce you to help you think about, pinpoint, and align with your emotions more clearly so that you can better be aware of them and kind of regulate them for your daily life and interactions. So let's start by talking about how emotions work. And I should say before I start, this draws heavily on the work of Lisa Feldman Barrett. Highly recommend her books and her TED Talk. When I first read them, probably a year and a half ago, it really changed the way I think about emotions, especially as a neurodivergent person. So I'll introduce you to some of the concepts that she talks about, some of the research, and how it may be different than what you think about now. So, the first thing, this is a myth to bust, is that emotions are not universal. What's going on with your emotions is not the same thing that's happening in the movie Inside Out, where you have kind of 4 or 6 basic characters that come up automatically. So I think, it's 6 universal emotions that the kind of classical view says there are. It's things like fear, anger, disgust, happiness, sadness. And the idea is that, they just sort of happen. They arise, they're the same for everybody. But they're not. Emotions are actually much more nuanced and cultural and even physical than we're used to thinking about them. So, the way I think about kind of classical emotions and what doesn't make sense about them, the idea of universal emotions, is how would you react if you were out of town for the weekend and you ran into your best friend? Is it surprise? Is it happiness? Is it both? Is it fear, right? Oh no, I didn't know she was going to be here. So it's not just one of these things, right? It could be any of them or a combination. So emotions, not universal. The second thing about how emotions work, and this is another one that really surprised me, instead of being some universal feeling that arises, emotions are actually created by your brain based on what your body is experiencing in the moment and the context that you're in. And they're also influenced by your culture and your environment. So, the way I like to think of and connect with this one is, I live in South Texas, and this is a place where we have snakes, right? So, imagine you're out camping. You know that there are poisonous snakes in this area. You're really hoping you don't see one because you're afraid of snakes and snake bites. You're walking kind of through the grass, and all of a sudden, you see a little bit of movement just out of the corner of your eye, and you are absolutely convinced there is a snake there and it is about to bite you. And then you take a breath, you look again, and there's nothing. It was just the breeze. So the fear that arose in you when you thought you saw that snake was your brain taking into context, I'm in an area with snakes. I hear a rustling. I see some movement in the grass. This is where I expect a snake to be. And then all of a sudden I feel fear, which can protect me in the moment. So that's an emotion that's automatically arising. Your brain's constructing it based on where you are. I also think about this as, the idea that you can be hopping mad or jumping with joy. Both of those look very similar, right? They come from very similar places. You're actually literally bouncing in these situations. But one's anger, one's this kind of pleasant happiness. So your brain is creating your emotions based on what's going on around you and how you're feeling. So going back and thinking about the idea of your body being involved, this hopping mad, jumping with joy, your body actually plays a really important role in your emotions. I think did I start the kind of event post with "Hanger is real, y'all"? That is absolutely true. Your body, I think Lisa Feldman Barrett calls it your body budget, but how much sleep you've had, whether you're hungry or not, if you're getting sunshine, how much exercise you're getting, right? I mean, y'all know I love to quote Elle Woods from the movie Legally Blonde. Exercise gives you endorphins. Endorphins make you happy. happy people just don't shoot their husbands. And I hope LinkedIn doesn't bar me for saying that because it's a movie quote. But that's kind of the way we're thinking about it here. Your body is influencing your emotions. The exercise that's giving you endorphins is making you happy. If you are teaching an entire 3-hour emotional intelligence class after you skip lunch one day, which is me, it can be hard to concentrate. It can be hard to keep up your energy and an enthusiasm in that situation because you are hungry and it's distracting. So your body plays a role in helping you regulate all these things. And, when you think about it, sometimes just getting a good night's sleep or having a snack can actually change your emotions. And then finally, there's one more concept I want to introduce you to, and that's called emotional granularity. So, thinking back to this classical view of emotions that we touched on at the beginning, the idea that there's a limited number of set feelings that are the same for all humans and arise automatically, it's actually much more subtle than that. I've never actually stopped to think about how many different words we have for different emotions. I'm sure it's thousands in English, if not more. There are many words for emotions in many other languages, but the idea behind granularity is that you can actually look at emotions. You have kind of a broad vocabulary of them, and you can pinpoint with certain accuracy how you are feeling. And we'll get into this in depth in a few minutes, but say, you look at that idea of the snake in the grass again, right? It might be fear, but it might also be surprise. Right? Oh no, there's a snake versus, ooh, a snake, that's cool. There might be some sort of kind of wonder, inquisitiveness that comes along with it, or even greater than fear, a kind of absolute terror. There could be a shock, right? So many different emotions that can arise in a situation. Having this vocabulary and these different words and the ability to distinguish between concepts in a very granular way is kind of how that works. And the ability to do that is actually correlated with mental health. And learning how to do that, how to distinguish emotions with granularity, helps you regulate and influence your emotions when they arise and helps you shift them if you need to. So here's the next question for you. How do you do that? Like, when you take a minute and think about it, how do you know how you're feeling? How do you measure it and interpret it? I'm just going to check the chat to see if anybody's dropped any comments in. Okay. Give you another sec to think about it. It's kind of a big question, right? How do you know how you're feeling? We're used to thinking of feelings, again, as these things that automatically arise in us. They just happen. That's always the view, anyway, that you may have had. But if your emotions are arising, if your feelings are arising based on what's going on around you, what's happening in your body, you can actually stop and think about how you're feeling, kind of have a process. So that might look like observing what's going on in your body. My stomach just dropped. Is that fear or am I hungry? It might be contextual. I'm crying. Am I sad? Or am I watching a movie that's making me emotional? Right? Am I at a wedding or a funeral? So actually pausing to think through these things can help you kind of pinpoint this and develop this emotional granularity. Sounds really hard to do. It is. Trust me, I know. It took me many years to learn to do this. But there are actually a number of tools that can help you along the way, help you to learn these things and help you to get in touch with these emotions. I actually had a t-shirt growing up in the 90s that was one of those emotion t-shirts that said, "How are you feeling today?" And it had, 25 different kind of funny faces on it. It's like happy, mad, sad, surprised, all those things you think of. Mine was in Norwegian because I was trying to learn Norwegian at the time. That's a story for another day, but you may have that cultural reference too. You can still find them on eBay, I checked. But, that sort of t-shirt that's a little bit, kind of more fun, maybe less convenient, not a thing you can memorize and carry with you. So today I wanted to introduce you to a tool that's called the mood meter. You may be familiar with like a feelings wheel. You may have seen those online. The mood meter works in a very similar way. It's a 2x2 matrix. I have an MBA. I love a 2x2 matrix, right? But it's also very logical and kind of makes it easy to kind of figure out where you are in quadrants. So if your brain loves a bit of logic, this could be really helpful for you. So you see we have these 4 quadrants here. And the way you use this is you think about the amount of energy that is running through your body and how pleasant it feels. And by doing that, you can kind of locate where your emotions are and think about the words. So we'll build this up over a couple of slides, but this is just the basic mood meter. So if we start at the top left, you see my little guys that I have in all my branding are called emotional forms. I chose them for a reason. So this guy up at the top who looks kind of angry, right, with the slit eyes and their those are the emotions that are high energy but low pleasantness. I don't know if you've ever literally been hopping mad. I am. It is not fun and it is very energetic. Then moving down to the next quadrant where we've got kind of our, kind of downcast blue emotional form. Those are low pleasantness emotions as well, but they're also low energy. So, like being a bit depressed perhaps, or a bit down, sitting on your couch in a blue mood. Moving over one to the right, you have the low energy emotions that are also high pleasantness. So these are the more serene, chilled out things. This is like the spa trip of emotions if you're a person who likes spas, right? Lying there on the table, getting a massage, pleasant, but you are not moving at all. And then one quadrant up, you have the high pleasantness, high energy emotions. This is what we think of as happiness. This is when you're jumping for joy. This is a lot of energy moving through your body, and it feels good and affirming and uplifting. So that's kind of the very basic version. But as we know, there is a lot more to this when we think about emotional granularity, when we think about kind of how these things work. So this is our second version of the mood meter. You can see we have a lot more little characters, little emotional forms on here. I've put energy and pleasantness on an axis now. But if we just look at, say, the top left quadrant, instead of just seeing anger, we might now see kind of rage, confusion, surprise, being slightly miffed, right? That's what I see in these 4 characters in the top quadrant. So as we dive in, we see more and more of a difference. Like there's nuance, but you can actually pick these out and see how they're different. I'm just going to pause for a minute. This blew my mind when I learned it, so I'll let you have a minute. I'll check the chat. I'll have some coffee. All right. So I think I've mentioned a couple of times how important language is to be able to distinguish these things. Um, we've talked about energy and pleasantness a lot. You can actually come in and pinpoint how much energy you have. Okay, I have a lot of energy. How much pleasantness is there? Ooh, it's very pleasant. I must be at the very top right of the mood meter. But what does that really mean? How can you really use that? Um, Turns out there are lots of different shades, right? There's actually 100 rectangles on here. If you really wanted to get super logical on it, you could do like scale of 1 to 10, right? How pleasant is this? How much energy do I have? Oh, we've got like a 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a 5. We're at the top right of the blue quadrant. And then there are words that overlay this. And I should say, this is based on a tool that was developed by Yale, I believe. I can't remember which institute. This is not a thing that I created. There's research, science, and development behind this. So just please know that. So anyway, this, I imagine it's too small to read because so many words for so many emotions. And of course, we know that this isn't nearly as many words for different emotions as we have in really any of our spoken or written languages. But this is just to say, you can go in, you can use a list like this, and you can pinpoint where you are and how you're feeling. I think of this as it's almost like training wheels. I imagine there are people in the world who have a very large vocabulary of emotions and the ability to just sort of understand these intuitively. I will say I am not that person. But I have got to a point where I've been able to personally kind of shift away from using the mood meter and internalized it now. I did not memorize all of these as vocab words, but all that to say, this is a tool for you to use. This is a tool for you to work with and grow. There are all sorts of different tools. You can get your 90s t-shirt, you can get your feelings wheel, whatever works for you. If you DM me, I'd be happy to send you a copy of this mood meter as well. This is something that can be very personal. Maybe I believe surprised is in the kind of, angry, high energy, low pleasantness quadrant. Personally, for me, surprise is a positive thing often. So for me, it would be in more of this higher energy, higher pleasantness. So you can shift that around. And then I can't remember if I mentioned this, but there are so many words that are not in English for like emotions that we can't describe. My favorite one is l'appel du vide, which is the call of the void, which comes from French and is very evocative. So that's the mood meter. And then just thinking again about this, really to emphasize what's important about it. Let's go back to that example of being on your camping trip and, being absolutely certain you've seen a snake. Fear takes a minute to calm down, right? It doesn't leave you that fast. So, you're out, you think you've seen a snake, you realize the snake isn't there. You recognize that you have the high energy and the low pleasantness. And then the question becomes, what can I do to shift this to an emotion that would be more helpful or more aligned with what I want in this situation? So maybe it's taking steps to calm the energy down a little bit. Um, I'm using a lot of hopping examples today, right? But maybe that's jumping, shaking it out, taking a few deep breaths to calm down. Maybe that's trying to shift the pleasantness a little bit. So that could be more like a reframe. Oh, hey, isn't that interesting that there's wildlife out here? Let me look at these flowers in this field. Isn't nature cool? Like, you can kind of reframe it like that to shift yourself. So recognizing your emotions, being able to shift them, really important human skill. So I think we should recap quickly because I'm sure that was a lot of information. Let's just quickly go back to how our emotions work. Remember, they're not universal. Your brain is not like Inside Out. There's not a limited number of feelings that come up in every situation. Emotions are created by your brain from what's going on in your body and the context in any given situation. Your body plays a real role in your emotions and how they work. Anger is real. And achieving this ability to distinguish between emotions is really important, this emotional granularity, so you can understand exactly what you're feeling and then shift it if you need to. And a tool like the mood meter can be a great way to do that. So, to kind of bring it all back and bring it to a close, here's the next question for you. If you have to choose one word, only one word, to describe how you're feeling right now, what's that word? I'll give you a minute to think about it. All right. So I suppose I could share my word, which I've realized I've now gone through 2 words. I think presenting for me is something I enjoy very much and it always gives me a lot of energy. So I have been in this high energy, high pleasantness, let's say enthusiastic for 20 something minutes now. But the second I stopped to kind of have a sip of coffee, let y'all kind of think for a minute, answer a question, the energy level dropped a little bit. So now I'm getting to a little bit more satisfied, let's say. Emotional granularity at work. So I think the only thing that remains is to thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. I am really excited to have been able to share this with you. If you do have any questions about the topic, please let me know. And if you found my spelling mistake, 10 points for you. One more thing, if you would like a copy of this mood meter, please send me a message. I'm happy to share it with you. So with that, I will be back next week talking about what even is coaching. That's another thing where we have quite a few myths to bust and quite a few more Legally Blonde quotes coming up. So I'd love if you join for that. Week after that is Thriving at Work, which is a thing that I've been thinking about and asking questions a lot about lately. And that will be available for you to register for later on this afternoon. And the week after that, which I'm super excited about, is what I'm calling my anti-corporate quarterly business review. So I hope to see you in any or all of those. And I hope that you have a lovely afternoon.